Two things we have to talk about before we get this video underway. Firstly, I think, did the NHL change the font on the standings right here? I mean, was this always bold text? I can't actually highlight. Okay, I can highlight this. Atlantic Division, great. But I can't do it for the actual team names. Was this always bold? I feel like it wasn't like this. I'm tripping out. Secondly, there is street sweeping, that's what it is. Street sweeping going on outside. It's pretty loud, so if you hear any buzzing or hums in the background of this audio commentary, then I apologize for that. But this show is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Go out there, check out the first link in the description to save some money on your VPN, get some free months, and support this YouTube channel in the process. Today we are talking about two of my favorite teams, because not only are my Vancouver Canucks having a pretty difficult time in the wildcard race in the Western Conference, but my other two faves, Montreal and Detroit, are also on the outside looking in. At least at this very moment in time. And don't get me wrong, I'm not pulling this out of nowhere, I'm not trying to make something out of nothing. Okay, maybe I am, it depends on where you're coming from, but I'm ultimately making this video because I saw a post on the Habs subreddit that talks about both of these teams, Detroit and Montreal. Heck, you can even include Ottawa in there if you really wanted to do that, since they're sandwiched in between the Wings and the Canadiens. But if you head over to the divisions right here and you look at that Atlantic, right now, 1, 2, 3, Toronto, Florida, Tampa Bay, they are all in the top of the playoff race. But if you scroll down, Detroit, Ottawa, and Montreal, 4, 5, 6, are all on the wild card race, the outside looking in. None of these 4, 5, and 6 ranked teams are going to dethrone Toronto, Florida, or Tampa. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. The wild card right now is held by Columbus. It's also held by New York. The Rangers, that is. So, for now, we are on the outside looking in if you're a Red Wings, Canadiens, or a Sens fan. But I wanted to talk about how things are heating up for both of these teams, and it comes to us via the Hockey Reference Playoff Odds model. Take a look at this post made by Morsophius on the Habs sub. The Habs have moved ahead of Detroit in Hockey Reference's playoff odds. And Hockey Reference posted this. If you take a look at the odds for the playoffs, right now, according to their model, the Montreal Canadiens have a 23.2% chance of making the playoffs. The Wings have a 17.5% chance of making the playoffs. You can see right here, the Ottawa Senators have a 53.8% chance of making the dance, so they're actually above 50%. They are higher than both Montreal and Detroit, I think combined as well. Had to do the mental math on top of my head there. Ottawa also has a 1% chance of winning the Stanley Cup via Hockey Reference. Montreal and Detroit are down there at 0.2 and 0.3 respectively. I did want to dive into this because it is interesting when you take a look at just the numbers. Okay, right now Montreal and Detroit have the same amount of games played. Detroit has one more point. They have the same amount of wins. It's just Detroit has an extra overtime loss, which is why they have 66 points via Montreal's 65. They're both negative in terms of their goal differential, and they have been pretty interestingly up and down the past little while here. Detroit's 5-4-1 in their last 10. Montreal is 6-4-0. Let's go out there and read some of the commentary from our Habs subreddit users on the Habs and Red Wings status right here. 0.2% chance of winning the cup. Yeah, the Montreal Canadiens have, what is the math on that? So 1 out of 100 is 1 out of 100. 0.2 out of 100 is 1 out of 500? Is that correct? I'm not too sure how the mathematics work out. I'm kind of stupid. It's been a long time since I was in pre-cal, guys. I was one of the best pre-cal students, actually, in my school. Also did get a math award for one of the contests a few years ago. But anyways, all of my math whiz-onomics aside, let's continue here. 1 out of 500, there you go! Let's go, baby! Hell yeah! I got that right. I didn't read this beforehand, I promise. Ottawa at over 50% is so funny to me. Strength of schedule. We're going to get into that and more in this video. 4.4% chance for the Boston Bruins makes me happy. They're toast, starting to trade for a rebuild. Yep, that's exactly what we are seeing out of the Bees, baby. They just traded away that Trent Frederic yesterday. But I did want to talk about playoff odds and playoff models, because while it's true that Montreal is higher than Detroit in the playoff odds for Hockey Reference, if you head over to moneypuck.com, it's actually the opposite. MoneyPuck has their own playoff odds, as everybody likes to refer to, and while you do have some teams near the top, like the Winnipeg Jets and the Washington Capitals are at 100%, you have teams like Detroit and Montreal down there. Detroit has a 23.4% chance of making the dance. Montreal has a 13.4% chance. Montreal has much lower odds over here, I think, because MoneyPuck is putting a lot more emphasis on the actual standings as they are right now. How Montreal has one fewer point in the same games played as Detroit, thus validating Detroit's playoff schedule and their odds a little bit higher. It seems to be more placent on the actual points rather than strength of schedule and the games coming up, because if you take a look at strength of schedule, I mean, according to Tankathon.com, Detroit has the most difficult strength of schedule in the 21 remaining games in the league. There isn't another NHL team that has a higher strength of schedule than Detroit. They have the most difficult opponents remaining. Vancouver has the 5th most, so I'm feeling very amazingly positive about that. Yeah, let's go Vancouver Canucks. But Detroit, they're up here. Most difficult schedule in the NHL. Montreal, if you scroll down, they're 19th. So they have some pretty easy opponents in comparison to Detroit, which I guess is why the Hockey Reference page is putting Montreal that much higher. They're at 23% for Montreal versus 17.5% for Detroit. It looks like MoneyPuck is just focusing more on the points, the raw hard points themselves, which is why Montreal is down there at 13.4% and Detroit's at 23.4%. Vancouver's 36.5%. Ay, I'm feeling really bad about that. But anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are your opinions about the Montreal Canadiens and the Detroit Red Wings and their playoff race? We just saw the Habs re-sign Jake Evans, which is totally not a seller's move, quote-unquote. We've been getting a lot of really good quotes from Evans himself. He wanted to be a Canadian. He committed himself to Montreal, getting less money with the Habs compared to what he could have gotten on the free agent market. So obviously, massive respect to Jake Evans for putting the Canadiens in this spot to prioritize Montreal. But when you think about their situation, they do have a much easier schedule than some of the teams that they are competing against in the playoff race. Also, what you should be noticing here, because when you think about the Hockey Reference playoff odds model putting an emphasis on strength of schedule, guess what? That Ottawa Senators team that we had just talked about, 53.8% to make the playoffs, they have the easiest schedule in the East. They're doing a pretty good job for themselves, being right there in the playoff race. They're tied with Montreal with one fewer game played, but they also have a much, much easier schedule than most every team in the league, spare St. Louis. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the Montreal Canadiens and the Detroit Red Wings and their playoff odds. What are your thoughts on Montreal being ahead of Detroit in some models, Detroit being ahead in other models, Detroit having the most difficult schedule remaining in the National Hockey League, and some other rivals for that final wildcard being a lot further down. I'm talking about Ottawa. I'm talking about Montreal. Columbus, they have a pretty difficult time too. They're 4th in terms of strength of schedule remaining on the year. So how is that going to play into the wildcard race in the East? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below how things are heating up for Detroit and Montreal. I hope you enjoyed this British Ash Roll 99. And bye.